Hi, I'm Emily. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about something that I keep getting asked about, and that is pen names. First off, what is a pen name? It can also be known as a nom de plume or nom de plume, additional name, whatever, an alter ego, if you will. But basically, a pen name is anything that an author chooses to go by that is not actually their name. I actually have 4 separate pen names, and I'm going to get into why I have them, why it was necessary for me, and if I think that you too should get a pen name. But before we start, let's talk a little bit about why you might want to use a pen name if you're an author. Now, I have heard a lot of people talk about this, especially those who all of a sudden receive massive amounts of fame once their book explodes into the stratosphere, and then they have to deal with basically the ramifications of people being able to find them, find their home, find where they live, all that different stuff. So in the case of using a pen name, if this was you and all of a sudden your book blew up, people wouldn't be able to locate you specifically because your pen name would be what they see, and it would keep them from knowing all of your specific details. Other reasons include you're writing in a different genre, or you're writing in a different category, so young adult versus adult, or something like that. For me personally, I will give you a little bit of the reason behind why I have so many pen names and why I went the route that I did with them. So let's travel back in time. Zoop. It was about 2015 or so, and I had been writing a lot. I was a ghostwriter for 8+ years, and I basically wrote a lot of different books for different authors, and I saw, or even publishing companies really, I saw them taking my books, publishing them online, and doing really well with them, and I thought to myself, why couldn't I do that for me? So I decided to do something a little sneaky. Now, at the time, and this is very important, I was already agented. So I had already signed a contract with my really awesome agent, and we were shopping around a book of mine, was in the works, things like that were happening, but it wasn't really happening fast enough for me. And I really wanted to see if I could potentially put something out, do it fast enough to gain some traction, and then kind of have experienced the indie publishing side, but also not have it tied to my name. And this is really the reason why I started with my very first pen name. Because I was agented, anything that I would do under the name that I signed with my agent with would then need to go through her. That is totally the way that it should be. So I'm not saying this as a way to circumvent her, but I really wanted to just try my hand at something. And I didn't want it to be a book that I was having her shop around for me. I just wanted it to be a sweet romance, kind of like a Hallmark movie, make it really simple, that type of thing. Now, what I was working on with her was romantic suspense, so it was in a different category, but if I were to have gotten a contract with a publisher at that point, and I had a book or more out under my name, then I would have to disclose all of those sales records to that publisher, and that impacts things like your advance, how they see how successful you could be, and things like that. Now, why this mattered to me at the time was because putting out those books under my pen name, I wasn't spending a lot of money to put them out. I talked about this in a previous video, but I should have hired an editor and I didn't. I had a lot of great friends who edited for me and they did a good job, but I just didn't have the resources to pour into those books. So I also didn't have the resources to pour into those books marketing. So I knew that I wasn't going to sell millions of copies. Now, had I sold millions of copies, I for sure would have wanted to disclose, hey, this is me. But because it was just kind of more of an experiment, I thought better to keep my names separate, kind of have my fun playtime, put out whatever books I wanted, and then be more serious with my other name, my actual name with my agent. Now, fast forward again, where I got my first few contracts, and that was where I had to make a decision. I had ghostwritten under different names that I could not disclose because I signed a non-disclosure agreement, which is totally normal when you're doing ghostwriting. But I was able to use their sales records to say, hey, I'm actually a person who puts out these books and these are the kind of stats that I'm getting. I just can't tell you what the name of that person is. And I was able to get contracts based on that, which was really nice. Since I was going to be publishing under my name, I decided that it was finally time that I could tell people that I was actually this other person. I had already had these contracts signed. They were under a different name, so I was able to come out and just say, hey, this is me. Now, all of that is well and good, but guess what? I actually have another pen name, right? So since I had already put out all of those books and I already knew what I was doing, when it came to my science fiction and fantasy books, I decided to use yet another name. Complicated, yes, but it makes a lot of sense in this case for me specifically because my other two pen names and books are in the Christian market. We call that the CBA. And I wanted to be publishing in the general market with my YA and adult science fiction and fantasy books because I just felt like they were going to fit better in that market. And so I decided to yet again create a new name. So the name that I published under for my general market books is actually my maiden name and my initials. And I liked that. I've mentioned this before, maybe not on a video here, but I've talked about it a little bit, how I am an only child and I'm a daughter, so I wanted to kind of let the legacy of my side of the Hendricks family live on through my books. So I decided to publish under E.A. Hendricks for those books. Now, that leaves me with a total of 3 names. There is a 4th. I don't really write under it right now. It's kind of sitting out there as something that I could do something with later if I wanted to. I don't disclose it here for the very same reasons that we're talking about. There are some things that I want to publish in to test out the waters to see how it's going, maybe to make some money on the side. I'm not doing that right now, but it's something that I could do in the future, so I just don't disclose that right now because I don't really need to. So those are the reasons why I decided to go with 3 different pen names. But the big question is, should you go with a pen name? Let's dive into it. Perhaps you've established yourself as an author in one market. Maybe you are just really well known for your romantic suspense, but you really want to try your hand at something new and you're not sure if your readers will follow you over to that. Or the categories are just so wildly different, you can't imagine cross-promoting them and having it make sense. If that's the case, a pen name might be perfect for you. Now, you can choose whether or not you disclose this to your existing readers. I have found, and I've heard this a lot, especially on TikTok, that readers want to know. They want to know everything you write. They want to know all your pen names. They want to know everything because they don't really care. They just want to read what you write because they like what you write. So to me, that actually means I think the market is changing. It used to be very particular. If you wrote really heavily in mystery and thriller, you couldn't break into romance with that same name and you'd need to get a new name. I don't think that is the case anymore, but it could be a situation where you're going from writing young adult to adult and maybe your content is just wildly different. Someone that comes to mind is Bridget Kemmerer. She is a really great author, and I really enjoy her young adult books. And now she's branched out into adult. I mean, Adrienne Young has done the same thing. Actually, a couple of the people on my shelves have. And so they're keeping their names. And I think that that is something for us to follow through on to see, okay, they just have to be very clear in their marketing that, no, this new book, it is not a YA, so there's going to be content warnings and things like that. But if you were like me and you're maybe writing in some different markets, like Christian versus the general market, where to me, it's not that the content is different necessarily. Like my content levels are always going to remain the same across everything I write because that's just who I am. But my young adult science fiction, fantasy people really don't care about my sweet romance. In the same way that my sweet romance readers don't really care about my science fiction and fantasy books. So marketing to both of those communities is really challenging, and I can't see a way to merge them, at least not at this point. So I decided to keep things separate. That means having one social media for those pen names and one social media for the other pen name. It gets very complicated, but that's the way that works best for me. If it's you and you're wondering, how should I do this? Do I pick a pen name? You have to ask yourself, who are you going to be writing for? Are you going to be writing in multiple genres and you're just going to communicate that early on to your readers so that they know? That will work too. But then also something to consider is whether or not you want your real name out there. A lot of people don't, and I can totally respect that, so that might be a great reason to get a pen name. So what do you think? Have you decided to write a book and you're going to use a pen name? Do you already use a pen name? Have you decided, no way, no pen names? I'm very curious to hear what you think. If you haven't already, take a moment to like this video, and would you consider subscribing? I love growing this community, and you can expect to see a video from me about once a week. Right now, things are a little bit crazy just because of my Kickstarter having finally ended, which is really exciting. And so now I'm moving into the fulfillment stage, and I'm still writing the third book too, so there's a lot of chaos going on. I love seeing your guys' comments, and I'll be back here next week with another video. As I like to say, go boldly and write.